As a mountain biker, I can honestly say that I've ridden a lot of bikes over the years, and a few have been pretty impressionable, and a few have been not so much. But there's always one when it comes to a particular bike that really, from a biker's perspective, you have those memories, those core memories of it did something, it lit something within you. And I have one very specific bike that did that. Like for instance, the Polygon Siskiyou T9. This bike is an absolute dream and a lot of people would love to own this bike. And yeah, it does. It smooths out the trail and it makes it buttery smooth. But it didn't spark that energy that I experienced in the past. So even bikes like this one here, the Superior Issue R, which is an extremely high-end XC race bike, coming in at under around 25 to 24 pounds for a full suspension, completely carbon everything, XTR equipped all over it. This bike is amazing, but it still didn't quite have the spark of the bike that I'm talking about that I experienced in the past. So I seem to keep finding myself going for full suspensions and not quite getting the feeling that I had from this original bike. So I thought, why not try some hardtails? I tried the Polygon Xtrada 7, completely awesome budget-friendly bike, coming in at right around $1,000, but that wasn't quite it. So I decided to go on an adventure and build my very own carbon Chinese hardtail that was gonna weigh practically nothing. And if you guys have seen this series, this bike is the one that I just built, coming in right around 21 pounds for a hardtail bike. Absolutely bonkers. This bike is lightning fast, super nimble, and very agile. However, it didn't quite hit the spark. So at this point, you might be thinking, Mike, what bike actually hit the spark and made you think differently about mountain biking in general? Well, if you guys have been around the channel long enough, you'll remember a bike that I purchased from Walmart called the Giordano. This is it. Now, what made the Giordano special? I'm not really sure. It may have been just the overall geometry of the bike. It may have been the excitement of taking an inexpensive bike and building it up to something a little bit better. Or it may have been the fact that it was just an inexpensive bike and I felt like it rode way beyond its capabilities. However, that bike was really short-lived because it did have some flaws in it. Like it didn't have through axles, didn't have boost spacing. It wasn't really ready for the future, but the geometry, the feel, the vibe, that's something that I've been chasing for quite a while. And I think I'm onto it. I think I know the type of bike that gets me excited to go out and ride all the time. And I think that's where this exact bike comes in. Coming in at an affordable price, this is the State 4130 Trail. We're gonna review this bike today and take it out and give you my honest thoughts on what this trail-worthy hardtail is actually like. And the big question is, does it light the fire like the Giordano did? Let's go. Now, if you guys haven't ever heard of State bicycles, they've really made headways in the road bike and gravel bike industry, coming in at affordable prices, and some of their bikes made with steel, some of them made with carbon. This particular one is their very first time that they've ever made a mountain bike. This is the 4130 Trail, and it comes in at a full retail price of $1,499. That's fully built. You can buy the frame by itself for $495. And you can get this bike in 2 different colors. The particular one that I got is a very unique color called Patina Gold, but you can also get this in a color called West Sunset. I think that both of these colors are an excellent choice for this particular bike because we have so many just standard bikes out there. To have something with just kind of unique colors really does set these bikes apart. Now, when you order this bike, it's a direct-to-consumer bike, and it literally comes in a small box that you have to assemble this entire bike. So just a bit of warning, if you don't know how to assemble a bike or you don't have the appropriate tools to fully build a bike from a frame up, you're going to want to take this directly to your local bike shop and have them assemble it for you. I was actually pretty surprised at how much of an assembly process this was because I've done a ton of direct-to-consumer bikes, and this is the only brand that I've ever seen where you have to assemble almost 100% of the bike. Now, for me, this worked out great. I had a blast doing it. I love it. But being that I wasn't prepared for it, I can only imagine the end consumer that doesn't have any tools might be pretty shocked. Now, as for the color on my particular bike, the Patina Gold, it is what a lot of people are calling a more mustard color, and it's super unique. For me, personally, I didn't really care for the color when I first pulled it out of the box, but the more and more I ride this bike, the more I absolutely love this color. And I think that this color is actually pretty awesome. Now, whenever you order this bike, you do get a lot of customization options. It starts at $1,499. You can get it in multiple frame sizes, multiple colors. You can even choose between a standard microshift 11-speed, or you can get a SRAM Eagle Axis setup on it. Then you can also choose between the standard wheels or some MB wheels. You can even get the non-dropper post, or like mine, it has a P&W range dropper post on it. And then also you can change from the Tektro hydraulic disc brakes up to a SRAM DB4 brake. And then you can also select whether or not you want it to come with a lizard skin chainstay protector. I really like the fact that you can customize the bike down to this detail, because typically when you buy a bike, you usually get like the entry level, the mid level, and the high end, and the extremely high end. And those jumps are usually drastic in price because they not only upgrade one part, they upgrade all the parts. Where with this one, you may not want the MV wheels, but you may want the SRAM Axis rear derailleur setup. And you can do that. And it'll only cost you $500 more as opposed to well over $1,500 more. So having the ability to customize your parts and fine tune it is really, really nice. Now, the other thing is I do like the fact that they do sell these frames separately. So it's nice that you can pick a frame or a fully equipped bike. Now, I do have to say the sizing is a little bit confusing on this bike because my frame says it's a medium. I asked for a large, but here are the sizings that they have. They have extra small, 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 medium, medium large, and extra large. So I'm not really sure why it doesn't have an M/L on my frame and it just has an M. I'm not really sure by just looking at it which frame I actually have, but after looking at the measurements and everything, I know that I've got a medium large, which fits somebody between 5'10" and 6'1". Now let's take a look at the components that come on this bike whenever you purchase it for the $1,499 price point. First up, let's start with the wheels and tires. These are WTB wheels. They're tubeless ready rims, so you're good to go. They have boost spacing, so that's 110 and 148 millimeter, and they are sealed bearings. These are pretty nice wheels. I know they're entry level, but overall, these are wheels that should last you a very long time. These tires that are on here really did surprise me. They're the WTB Trail Boss. These are going to be the tubeless ready ones, and they're 29 inch by 2.4 inch. I really, really like these, but unfortunately, I destroyed one of them. Oh! Hit hard on that one. Now, what's cool about this is that they do give you tubeless valves, so you're ready to go tubeless whenever you pick this bike up. Now, as far as the drivetrain, the standard drivetrain that comes with this, I was real hesitant about it because I've had experiences with Microshift XLE in the past, and it's been decent, but it wasn't amazing. However, after my first ride, I did fine tune it, and my second and third ride, this bike felt super dialed in and I had zero shifting issues. Now, this is an 11 speed, so up front, you're going to get a 32 tooth narrow wide chainring. And on my particular bike, it came with 165 millimeter cranks. I personally am kind of tired of seeing 175 crank arms installed on mountain bikes. I think 170 should be the max for the average rider, where 165 should be the default. As far as the cassette on this drivetrain, it is an 11 to 46 tooth. While it's not as wide of a range as, say, a SRAM Axis or a Shimano SLX or XT, the 11 to 46 tooth in my area seems to be more than enough. Plus, I get that little extra workout whenever I have to go climb those hills. Now, the disc brakes are kind of controversial on this. I'm a huge fan of Tektro hydraulic brakes, and these HDM 275s, I've used these on so many bikes, and I find them to be extremely reliable. The internet could tell you something different. It seems like there is a group of people that just absolutely despise these brakes, but for me, I personally love these brakes. Coming in right around 178 to 180 pounds, these brakes have no problem stopping me, being 2-piston and 180 mil rotors. However, if you're a little bit concerned about these brakes, you can upgrade to the SRAM DB4s. These are 4-piston hydraulic brakes. I've used these brakes also, and they're also excellent. Now, as far as the cockpit goes, this comes with some State Bicycle Company bars. They call them their low-rise bars. They're 770 millimeters wide, and they've got a 35 millimeter clamp on them. So these are definitely beefier bars, and they're decently wide. So if you like wider bars, you can keep them, but if you want to cut them down to, say, like 740 or something like that, you can do that also. Now, the stem is also going to be a State Bicycle Company. They call this their 3D forged alloy, and of course it's 35 millimeter clamp to match the bars. I think this stem actually looks pretty cool. It kind of has this BMX vibe to it, but being a little bit different, I actually kind of like the vibe that it puts out. Now, the seat that's on this bike is really surprisingly comfortable to me, but this is all going to be personal perspective, all what you prefer. I am a big fan of the WTB Rocket and Volt saddles, and this is pretty close to those, just slightly different. And to me, it had enough padding and just enough comfort overall that felt really good. This sits on steel rails, and honestly, it's just a personal preference. So you may get on this and not like the seat, but for me, I think they pretty much nailed it for a happy medium. Now, the seat post on this is a 31.6 millimeter. Whenever you order this bike at the $1,499 price, you're going to get a standard seat post, not a dropper post. My big recommendation is if you don't have one on hand, just go ahead and pay the 200 bucks and get the P&W dropper, because that comes with the range dropper post, plus it comes with the lever. And that's actually a pretty good deal overall. On my particular build, this is a 150 mil travel dropper. If you get the extra small, it's 125. If you get the extra large, it's 175. Now, as far as max tire clearance on this, you can run up to a 2.6 inch wide tire, but it comes with the 2.4. And honestly, for a trail bike, I feel like 2.4 is the sweet spot. 2.6 is really good if you're going to be riding quite a bit of rough stuff, but I think 2.4 is a happy medium for most people. Now, before we get into the geometry of this bike, I just want to talk about my initial thoughts whenever I got on this bike. So as you guys know, I was seeking a bike that really lit the fire, kind of like what the Giordano did for me. And I wasn't really sure if this bike was actually going to do it, but just looking at this on paper and then seeing this bike in person, I got really excited about what this bike's capabilities could be. Now, my first experience out on this bike, I did take this out on an XC style trail, because I knew that if I could have a blast on this trail, I could have a blast on just about any trail that I put this bike on. And I also knew that this would be the test to see, does this bike feel snappy? Does it feel fast? Does it feel nimble and agile? And within the first mile, I pretty much fell in love with this bike. This bike felt exactly like I had hoped it would. There's always this chance that you're going to get a bike that's going to feel super sluggish, but this bike felt like it wanted to respond to every pedal stroke. It wanted to climb really easily, and it also wanted to descend, even though there aren't many descents in this particular area. I felt really in control with this bike the entire time. And we'll go over some of the geometry here in a minute and why I think that this bike feels super dialed in with control. But overall, this bike felt really solid. It rode extremely quiet out on this trail, and the RockShox Silo fork felt really, really smooth. I wasn't sure about that particular fork, but that first ride convinced me that this particular fork is a great entry-level fork. The other thing that I noticed was the WTB tires were a pleasant surprise. They felt nice and supple, but they also felt like they gripped the trail really well. The trail was pretty dry whenever we were out there, and honestly, sometimes this trail can be a little bit slippy in the turns, but with these tires, it gripped really well. The other thing was I was kind of concerned that these tires would have too aggressive of a tread. Because I'm used to riding XC style tires, kind of like Maxxis Recon Race, these tires are more trail worthy, so they grip really, really well, but sometimes you can get a sluggish tire. Not with these WTB tires. These things were absolutely amazing. So much so that I started looking into these when I got home from this ride to possibly equip on other bikes that I have. So now that we've seen some of the footage from my very first ride, let's go ahead and let's talk about the geometry on this bike, because I think that's really where the ride quality really comes into play. Now, this is going to be all the numbers from my size medium large. So if you guys are looking at a different size, you may want to take note, not all those numbers match up, of course, so you're going to want to check out your particular size. But I do think that there's some key geometry numbers in here that really make this bike stand out. So a medium/large is designed for somebody who has a 32 to 33 inch inseam and is between 5'10 and 6'1". I fall perfectly in that realm. So this particular bike is great for me. They also call this a 43 centimeter frame. So on the size medium large, the actual top tube length comes in at 645.5 millimeters. The bottom bracket drop is 56 millimeters, and that seems to be the same on all the frames. The bottom bracket height is also the same across all frames at 321 millimeters. Now they're claiming the bike weighs 32 pounds, 8 ounces. We're gonna find that out. I'm gonna put that on the scale.
All right, so I've got it on the scale here, guys, and don't forget, I've got pedals on, and I'm also converted over to tubeless, and I have that P&W dropper post. So the weight's gonna be a little bit different than what they stated. Pretty sure they weigh this without a dropper post and without pedals, and probably not tubeless converted. So I came in at 34 pounds, 7 ounces.
Now the crank arm length that they have listed online shows a 170 for the medium large, but on the size small medium, it shows a 165 millimeter. I know my crank arms on this bike are 165, so I'm not really sure what's going on there because I'm pretty sure that I have a medium large. Now, one of the important things on this that I think gives it its super good riding ability is the head tube angle. These days, that seems to be the thing that everybody looks at first, and I'm guilty of that too, because this really does make a big difference on what this bike is designed for. And this particular bike has a really good head tube angle at 65 degrees. Now, I think there's a sweet spot between 64 and 66 degrees that really makes a bike a true trail bike. Anything over 66 in the 67 plus range is going to be more of an XC style bike, kind of like what we saw on the XC Chinese carbon build that I did just the other day. And anything below, say around 64, is going to be more enduro and more downhill. So I think this particular head tube angle is right in that sweet spot for a good quality trail bike. Now the head tube length on this is 120 millimeters, and the size medium large is 465 millimeters in reach. And it feels really, really good for my height. Now the chainstay length seems to be the same across all the sizes, 426.5 millimeters. I think this is a pretty crucial number for this particular bike. Having a chainstay that comes in right around that measurement really does make this bike feel alive. I found whenever I would go around a corner, I felt like I could accelerate really quick. I felt like it was really snappy going up hills, but I also felt like it made it pretty nimble. And I would say probably not a lot of steel frame bikes are gonna have such a short chainstay because a lot of times you're not gonna get a curved tube. The seat tube on this one is curved slightly, so I think that's allowed them to pull it in just a little bit, roughly about 10 to 15 millimeters beyond what you see some other brands actually doing. So I do think that that's a pretty crucial number overall. Now the seat tube angle is also important when it comes to climbing. This comes in at 74.4 degrees, and I think that's pretty standard across the board. Now, I do think that this seat tube angle does feel pretty good. I do think that they could possibly have gone a degree steeper and made this an even better hill climber. But if they would have done that, it may not have felt so good going down some steep stuff. But generally having a little bit steeper head tube angle could potentially offset any type of front wheel lift. However, I didn't experience any front wheel lift on any of the rides that I did on this yet. And so I think that they probably nailed this, but maybe a degree more might have been even better. Now the stack height is something that I've been paying attention to on a lot of my bikes. This particular one falls in a nice spot of 646.5 millimeters. Now to me, standover height is different than what it used to be in the past. You used to always look at standover height to size the bike to you. But to me, standover height really is just how easy is it going to be to have this bike move underneath you. And for the size medium large on a 29-inch wheel, you're looking at 826 millimeters. Now, overall length of a bike, you can expect a trail bike to be a little bit longer, but we have a few things on this bike that can make this bike potentially a little bit shorter, giving it a more nimble feel. And a lot of that comes down to the shorter chainstays. These chainstays come in about 10 millimeters shorter than a lot of other brands out there in this same category. So the overall wheelbase on a medium large is 1,211.7 millimeters. So overall on the geometry, I really do think State absolutely nailed it. There could be a few minor tweaks here and there, but those are going to be like little subtle changes that may work well on some trails, but may not work well on others. I think the design that they went with, this geometry setup, is a happy medium and it can work well in so many different situations. Now real quick, I do want to talk about this fork. This is the RockShox Silo, and this is the silver edition with 130 millimeters of travel. This particular fork I have been pretty interested in. It's kind of a replacement in my mind for the RockShox Recon Silver that we saw on so many bikes over the last several years. I hadn't ever ridden this fork until this particular bike, so I wasn't really sure what I was going to be getting into. But to be honest with you, I have been completely impressed with this fork. It's super smooth, easy to adjust, and it just feels really dialed in. And honestly, a lot of times the Recon fork felt relatively heavy. This particular fork, in my mind, doesn't actually feel all that heavy. It feels closer to like what I experienced with the RockShox 35 Gold. So you are getting a little bit heavier stanchions here than what you would get on, say, a gold fork as opposed to a silver fork, but super impressed so far. You get rebound down here at the bottom. You do get a quick release, which we don't see a lot on other bikes, but this can be pretty handy at times. And then also you get your compression adjustment up here and your air inlet over on the other side. With 130 millimeters, I kind of was questioning whether or not that was the right fork size for this, because when you're talking about a hardtail, you can get into kind of a gray area of, is 120 enough, 130 enough, or should you go all the way up to say 150 or 160? I think the sweet spot is going to be 130 to 150, all depending on the type of riding you're going to be doing. I think 130 is the right size to go with on this. And in my opinion, it did really balance well with this bike. Sometimes you get a heavy front fork and it just feels like the bike is really front heavy. I felt like how this bike is set up with this fork, it felt really well balanced out on the trail. So real quick, I do want to point out a few things that I think could be a little bit better on this bike. The paint is slightly thin in my opinion. I do have a few chips down here on the chainstays, and I just think it could be a little bit more durable. I did put some PPF right up here to protect from rubbing of the hydraulic lines and the shifting lines, but we are talking a $1,500 bike, so I can't expect the paint to be perfect, but I do wish that I would have PPF'd down here and a little bit more on the frame and not just up top here. The other thing I do wish is their sizing was a little bit more clear. I'm not really sure. This says medium, but they have a small medium and a medium large. That's a small thing that they can fix with a different sticker. And lastly, the one thing that I would definitely change before you even ride the bike are these grips. The grips are just a slip-on grip, and I found every single ride that I went out on, they actually slid down the bar just a little bit. A few things that I do want to point out that I really do like about this bike, other than the geometry and the ride quality, I do really like the external routing. I'm a huge fan of that now. That phase of all internal routing is cool, but it's a giant pain when you want to maintain your bike. And I find personally that I wind up not maintaining my bike as much as I possibly should. It's done really nicely, super classy looking. It just looks really, really clean. The only internal routing you have is for your dropper post right here. And I feel like that's pretty appropriate. And I also really like the Bottle Boss mounts. You get 3 right here, 3 down on the down tube here, and then you get 2 right here. There's plenty of spaces to mount all kinds of accessories. Now, one last thing that I do appreciate that I haven't mentioned yet, it does have a UDH rear derailleur on here. So my overall thoughts on the State 4130 trail is I'm pretty stinking impressed. Now, a hardtail isn't for everybody, but honestly, if you haven't learned on a hardtail, you're really missing out on a super fun experience while you go down the trail. And I know there's people out there who physically can't ride a hardtail because they're just too rough, and I totally get that. This is something that I wouldn't be riding all the time, every time on all the different trails. This is something I want to take out whenever I either want to take a little bit slower ride, or I want to have a little bit more kind of engaged experience on some of the trails that I'm familiar with. This will definitely not replace a full suspension, but I think this bike serves 2 purposes. One, it's a really great price for your very first mountain bike or your first hardtail, or it's a good hardtail to have alongside the full suspension that you've already got in your garage. Coming in at $1,499 without the dropper, but $200 more with the dropper, I think you're getting a stellar bike with great parts, great components, and I love the customization that State allows you to do on this. Not to mention these awesome colors that you can get this bike in. All right, guys, if you like this review and you want another video to watch on the State 4130 trail, go check out my friends over at Ace Bike Media. They've done, I believe, 2 videos on this particular bike, and they do a really good job. Colin over there rides really, really aggressively on this bike and really puts it to its test. So you're definitely going to want to check out their video. But if you guys enjoyed this video and you want to pick up your own State 4130 trail, or maybe check out some more info on it, use my links down below. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you guys do enjoy this content a lot, check out my Patreon, Mike's Unlocked Garage. You get early access and you get some behind the scenes stuff. Plus you get early access to my other channels when I post over there. But don't forget, hit the subscribe button if you already haven't, hit the like button, leave me a comment, let me know what you think of hardtails, and let me know what you think of the State 4130 trail, because I think this bike is pretty sick. All right, guys, get out there and ride your bike.
You was a threat. I do real life, do no tip for tat on the internet. We don't do that. See, I've been a threat and I've been a vet. Thought you knew that when I'm cashing checks. I don't